All right, everyone. Welcome back to another Canada Immigration Live Q&A. I'm here, Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer, with my fearless compadre. Oh, wait a minute. It's not Igor. I better change that. Alicia. That's awesome. All right,
That's
we'll
all
update
good.
that. How you doing, Alicia?
I'm well. I'm well. It's all right. I wouldn't mind if anybody mistook me for Igor. He's a good guy.
We just got the approval for his articles here today. We got it updated, so I was pretty happy about that. Igor was as
Excellent.
well. Okay, let's see here. Oh, wrong one. We're almost there. Almost. Let's fold it. Okay, I think we're good. How's that look? We got the right name on there. All right,
Perfect.
well,
Yeah.
welcome everybody. All right. Okay. Well, today was a pretty crazy morning here for me, and we were apologize for getting started just a little bit late, later than normal. I had a consult, some interesting consults this morning. It's always entertaining, but we are here to answer your questions on Canadian immigration. And yeah, Alicia, how are things going for you and for your practice, and anything new and exciting?
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a number of corporate clients that we're still making sure are getting their workers brought in. And so some of them are bringing workers in from the US and some of them are bringing workers in internationally. So that's keeping me busy. And then I have quite a few people who have received invitations to apply under Express Entry. So that has been fantastic. Some of them have been straight federal skilled workers, some of them have been CEC, and some of them have been PNP applications. So working through those and a few spousals here and there every now and again. And then occasionally people have interesting, unique questions and they just didn't realize and they need another set of eyes on something that they're preparing. And so those are the situations that have normally come from a consult. So I was talking to a client this week and she said, I didn't know about you and Mark until, halfway through my studies, right? After I'd already done my PGWP application. And she said, I wish I would have known about you guys earlier so that I could have avoided potential misrep or potential unauthorized
Yeah.
study because now it's potentially going to affect my express entry application. And so we're working together to try to sort through it. But it
Yes.
is nice to know that people are listening and watching, and hopefully this information is helpful so that you too can avoid pitfalls going forward.
Yes. I just had a consult just, I guess it was this morning, and the couple had chosen to do a 1 year program, Alicia, and so 1 year program. They're looking at a potential RNIP application through one of the rural northern immigration programs, but they're really just they don't have time, and there's no guarantees, and so they'd already filed their post-grad work permit, and I said, well, you may wish to consider like decline like withdrawing that post-grad work permit and taking another year of school so that you can get at least the 3 years. But it's hard because they were following whatever instructions that they received by some helpful person, and not everybody has the best interests of candidates at heart. And it's hard having those tough discussions where I say, look, the path you're on is really not a good one. So when
Mhm.
people reach out to us early, Alicia, early on in their journey, it is absolutely the best time, because then we can map out a strategy that gives them as many options as possible and actually will take them to where they ultimately want to be. And too many times I see representatives giving advice that's purely for just this small little discrete period of time to get someone to Canada, not caring about what happens after. And so yeah, anything that we can do, and I guess that's why we created the DIY courses, right? Express entry, the study permit course, spousal sponsorship. It's all to help educate people, and you may very well intend to hire a representative to help you with it. But by taking the course, you can at least educate yourself, so you know the pitfalls, you know the problem areas, and every course always starts out with modules and lessons on the top mistakes people make. And so those in and of themselves are often worth the price of admission. So all right. Well, we've got a few little shout outs. As we're giving shout outs to people, please make sure you post where you're tuning in from, and just yeah, give us a shout. So Paul is already asking here, what's your prediction for the next express entry draw cutoff? So this is one we talk about more than I think any other out there. Let's see if I got the right feed here. I do here. So the question becomes, the last round of invitations last week was another 3,500, and draw number 247, and the lowest score was 483. And yes, we've had some clients that benefited from that. What's your prediction, Alicia? What's your prediction?
Well, then I guess we should actually back up here, Mark, and say there is some other good news, and that is the strike has ended now.
Yeah,
So
yes.
we weren't sure, would they be doing draws during the strike? They did do draws during the strike. It was a smaller draw. It wasn't the 7,000 draw, it was the 3,500, but they did do a draw, 483. The good news is the strike has ended. So we'll see how that impacts things, right? Like, I think it was about
Mm-hmm.
9 days where the strike was ongoing, and that will have affected applications for sure. So the good news
Yep.
is those applications hopefully will continue to be processed now that the strike is over. But of course, not having people work for 9 days or being on the picket lines for 9 days means that some of the processing will be backlogged a little bit, and it remains to be seen how much. So hopefully they will do another draw next week. And I would hope, I mean, you can take a look at the figures in terms of the number of candidates that were in the pool, but I would hope that the CRS will probably come down a little. I'm predicting like 481. Like, I don't think it'll come down super low. It's probably going to hover around the same CRS score if I had to gaze in a crystal ball and just make a guess.
Yes, exactly. All right. We have, okay, we've got Joe here. He says, hey, Mark, hope you're well. Jay, shout out to Jay, first time on the live chat. Well, I've got a little applause for you, Jay. We'll celebrate Jay's presence here. Okay, let's see what else we've got. I'm going to adjust my mic a little bit here. I've got a brand new mic, you guys. I'm testing out here, and I think you guys should be able to hear me okay. All right, let's see who else we've got here. Oh, Joe's laughing because I had Igor up there. JK, hi, Alicia. That's great. Okay, Amar is over in Ivory Coast. Fantastic. Great to have you connecting in from across the ocean. Vanny, hello to you. Vita's watching from Toronto. Hello, Vita. Good to have you connected in. And then the top 10 here says as a question. I guess we'll see what the question ultimately is. So we'll get to those questions in just a second. Oh, Promise. Hey, hope you're doing well. Promise was the winner of a free access to the Express Entry course a couple months back. So great to have you jumping on. John says this is the best immigration channel on YouTube. Okay. Well, thank you, John. I'll give you a little celebratory cheer. Okay. Yushen says, hey, Mark and Alicia. Hi, how are you doing? And let's see what else we've got here. We've got a bunch of questions that have been piling in. Let's see. And then we've got Fiona, who is watching from Jamaica. All right. I think there's a couple other things maybe that we can just quickly touch on. One, you guys, is the proof of funds that has been updated. So if you haven't seen this yet, and you're going through Express Entry, remember that these funds now are increased just a little bit. So pay attention to those when you're filing your EAPR, because you need to make sure that the funds that you have available are meeting this level if settlement funds are a requirement. And then as Alicia indicated, I talked about this in my live yesterday at length. So you can watch the beginning where I covered a lot of this. But yeah, the strike is over, which is great. But there will be a little bit of a delay as they recover. And you can see these were the different areas that were impacted. But if you look at processing time, some countries, the processing times, obviously overseas visa offices like Alicia talked about, do not seem to be as affected, and they're business as usual. In fact, some processing times are starting to come down. Others, not so much, but it just depends on the country that you're coming from. Okay, are you ready for some questions, Alicia?
I'm ready. I also see a hello from Ryan, and he's coming from the States, and he says he wanted to give us a big shout out and thank you for all the posts and videos. Helped me a lot throughout the journey. So I thought I'd highlight that one too.
Oh, good. Let's see if I can find Ryan's here. Just give me a second. I've got so many that pile in here. Here it is. There's Ryan's comment. Hello from the States. Just want to shout out a big thank you for all the post videos. Helped me a lot throughout the journey. You're very, very welcome, Ryan. It's great that we love to hear the positive feedback from everyone, no matter where you're tuning in from. Okay, let's see if we can. Okay, let's pull this one up, Naveen. So FSW, okay, inland maybe is the I. EAPR, and there were a number of people that were drawn under the FSW. That targeted, well, really was a targeted draw. It was only FSW. It says EAPR, January 30th. Okay, so the increased proof of funds, and we just talked about that. How do I update it? Also, I already had excess funds, bank letter certified, so should I bother? So I'm assuming
Yeah.
that the number that was put in there, Alicia, was lower. So
hmm So the nice thing is that if you actually submitted your application, so I'm assuming that if your EAPR was January 30th, either you've submitted or maybe that was your ITA date. I'm hoping that you submitted by January 30th. But if you've already submitted under the old rules, you met the requirements for the proof of funds under the old rules, then you should be fine. It's only now that they have publicly said that there's been a change to the settlement funds that now applicants have to meet that proof of funds for FSW claimants. So hopefully, retroactively, you shouldn't have to go back and change your proof of funds if you met the requirement at the time that you actually finalized your EAPR. So as long as that was good, then you should be okay. If you do have excess funds already and you'd proven that as part of your proof of funds, that, if you were one applicant, you had over the 13,000, whatever it was at that time, you could go back and you could do a web form and say, by the way, I still continue to maintain my settlement funds at the increased proof of funds settlement amount. You could do that by web form, um, but you should be fine as long as the amount that you had proven at the time of your EAPR met the requirements that were publicly listed as proof of settlement fund requirements.
all right. Next question. This one's from Amara. And it says, when excluding voluntary a spouse from an express entry application due to his circumstances, dropping points be considered as misrepresentation when the sponsorship to join is launched after PR is granted. So
Mhm.
I think you can maybe decipher this question, Alicia.
Yeah. So strategically, Amara, some people take a cold hard look at the points, and they say, all right, if I'm the principal applicant, then I have enough points to be able to squeak through. But if I include my spouse, we won't, right? Just because it changes this point selection grid when you're applying with a spouse. And that is fine. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to say, I'm going to apply on my own as the principal applicant. The only problem with that, of course, is that your spouse is not included in your PR. And so you would have to actually make sure that you are completed, you're landed as a permanent resident, and then turn around, meet the eligibility requirements to sponsor a family member. So make sure that you can prove that you're established in Canada, that you're not going to be on social assistance, that you're eligible to sponsor, and then have your spouse do that application or do the application together for a spousal sponsorship through the new PR portal. The downside, of course, is that that's a longer processing time because it's just going to take time for your application to be assessed and then for your spouse to get PR. You can do all that. The key thing when you're submitting both applications is disclosing, properly declaring yourself to be married or in a common law relationship, continuous cohabitation for 12 months. And make sure that you're saying, yeah, for sure I'm married and here's my spouse and here's their details and here is, the information so that they can be medically examined to make sure that they are not inadmissible for medical inadmissibility and also that they are providing their police certificates if and when requested if there could be a potential criminality aspect. Other than that, when you go to sponsoring your spouse, you just have to prove it's a genuine relationship and everything was properly declared at the time that the principal applicant did their PR landing. Because if you fail to disclose a spouse at the time that you get landed, then 11790 rears its ugly head. And this is an awful provision of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act that says if, when the principal applicant lands as a permanent resident, they did not properly declare and have a family member do their medicals and be known to immigration, then they're considered forever not part of your family class. You can't ever sponsor them. And that's not the circumstances here. If you're declaring a spouse, you're just not including them. That is fine. That is allowed. You just need to explain it all properly when you do your express entry and when you go and do the spousal sponsorship.
Perfect. This is from Naveen. It says, thanks, Mark, Alicia, and Igor. Your entire team rocks. I'm going to refer my sibling to consult with you. She wishes uh, to, uh, live probably from UK to our dear, she wishes to maybe send love from UK to our dear Canada. Who knows? Yeah. Thanks, Naveen. Okay, let's jump into a few more here. Next one. This is from Superman. Hi, Mark and Alicia. Can I travel? And I'm going to start right off the bat with this question. Whenever someone says, can I? Normally we would do that one, but that's probably not the one. We would probably do this one here. Yes. So this one is anytime someone says, can I? That's really a legal question. It's really seeking legal advice. Now let's continue forward with the actual question. It says, can I travel to my home country while my CEC application is in progress? Can I change my job while waiting for the results? No job offer points. So if you want to generically address this, Alicia can, but Superman, we highly recommend that you slide over to our website right here. And it's super easy. Right up at the top, you'll see that there's, depending on how you're looking at it on your held or otherwise, you can just speak to a lawyer and you can easily book a consult right here. So we highly, highly recommend that you slide in and that you book a consult.
Mm-hmm. So, in general, and I can't provide specific legal advice because it's very important that we know all the circumstances for what's been going on in your life. When did you submit your application? Are there any complicating factors? Sometimes the big one is there going to be a requirement for an updated police certificate depending on how long you've spent in your home country during the last 10 years? And, are you getting into a situation where if it is going to make it 6 months, then maybe that's something that's going to affect your application. But in general, you're allowed to travel while you're doing your CEC application as long as you have a proper authorization to return. So for some countries that are visa required, in addition to having a work permit, you also have to have an updated temporary resident visa. For some countries, some people only need an electronic travel authorization. But sometimes if you've been here for a number of years, you did your study permit, you did your PGWP, sometimes the visitor visa has actually expired. And so you want to be really careful to make sure you have an updated visitor visa because that's your authorization to re-enter the country. So that's something to keep in mind. If you are looking at changing your job, it does depend on whether you had any sort of representations about a particular job or if that's going to change potentially the number of years of experience that you are claiming. Hopefully not if you're not claiming for job offer points and you clearly met your 1 year of Canadian work experience or 2 years of Canadian work experience while you were in Canada. So hopefully it won't affect your points. If you had a PNP application in the works, it doesn't sound like it because you're just saying CEC. Then if you do change employers with a PNP application and there were any sort of employer specific requirements on your nomination, even if you're not claiming job offer points, that could be a big problem. So these are just things to keep in mind in general when you're looking at whether you can travel and whether you can change a job.
Perfect. Lenora says, my Express Entry profile is expiring tomorrow. Can I already start a new Express Entry profile today and submit it only tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. And so generally you need to wait until UTC time for that application profile to expire so that you can then create another one. But Lenora, do make sure to go in and take screenshots or print a PDF of every single page in your Express Entry profile so you don't lose all the information that you went in and you created. So make sure you take a good copy of your application so you remember, what did you say in each of these fields? If you need to update them, make sure that they are updated. Take note of what your old Express Entry file number was, because eventually when it says, have you ever applied for PR before? Then you'll want to say yes. And even though you have an old profile, maybe it's not technically an application for PR. This is one of the things that we talk about in the course. How do you answer that question of have you applied for PR before? Probably you're going to want to disclose that first Express Entry or however many Express Entry profiles you've had in the past. So some things to keep in mind.
Perfect. Olucine says, if I want you to help review my Express Entry application before submission, how much do you charge? I'll just share this really quick because we don't want to spend a lot of time on this. But when you come to our website, let's adjust this a little bit. You'll see here at the top, we have our fees here. And our fees are listed as they're all listed based on program and how much we charge for each. So you can always go here to our website and you can get all the information on the fee structures that we have. And so yeah, that's basically a good place to go to get answers, and that's on the Holthe Law website. So definitely go and check that out. Okay, let's jump to a bunch more questions. Okay, Promise says, I'm trying to declare an outstanding loan in my EAPR, but the institution is taking forever to issue an official letter. Hence, I want to use the email communication stating the outstanding amount. So I think this is before submitting it, I think.
hmm And this is tricky because IRCC has a very specific requirement in terms of what they want in their completeness check for the proof of funds. And they want one bank letter, apparently, that's going to cover both assets and liabilities. And in practice, we know that most banks don't usually put it all in one letter. They'll normally say, well, you have these investment accounts or credit accounts or investment and banking accounts with our institution, and then separately they might say you have credit cards held with this institution or loans held with this institution. They don't usually put it in one letter, but you do want to get that information so that you can prove to immigration you have those settlement funds free and clear. So you don't have so much debt that it outweighs your assets in your accounts. So whatever you can do to try to make sure you are meeting the requirements that are specified in the express entry completeness check. So making sure that you're going back and forth trying to get the letter on official letterhead, if at all possible, that's going to list those loans for 6 months, plus the account numbers, plus that it's signed by an official and it's dated. It's got your full name and the details that are required. And I know it's tough, so proving that you have done the best that you can to meet those requirements.
Yes. Okay. I see there's two that was actually posted along those same lines. Talis says, after doing your express entry course, how much would be to review my my application before submitting? So Talis, it's great to connect with you. When you take the course and then you retain us, I always give your money back that you paid for the course. So that's the starting point for anyone who takes the course. Okay, let's see here. We're going to jump into a few more. Yushen says, I just received my FSW ITA. A consulate issued me a police certificate that doesn't conform to the IRCC requirements and refused all my requests. What should I do? So this is kind of a tricky one, Alicia. I'm not sure if we have an answer for this one, but what do you do when someone uses the IRCC instructions and what's given to them by the consulate doesn't match up?
hmm So, I mean, Yushen, I would recommend that you book a consult so we can take a look at exactly what you requested, what the consulate sent back, what the issues are, or how significant the discrepancies are. In general, though, one thing that I do recommend is to literally go on to the IRCC Express Entry. How do you request a police certificate? Go down to your country and then take a print to PDF of that page and say, okay, look, as of the date that, I got my ITA and I'm within my 60-day window, here are what the online instructions say, and then prove that you provided or requested that exactly like IRCC is asking, and then provide the evidence going back and forth between you and the embassy or the consulate saying, here's what they said, here's what I requested, here's what they provided, and this appears to be the only document that I can get from them in these circumstances. For some countries, there are multiple ways to request a police certificate. You can either go through the consulate or sometimes you can go to a local police station. So if that is the case, if you have another way of requesting a police certificate, I would say provide what the consulate has provided. And if you could also go to a local police station or apply online or do something differently, do that too, and just show that you've done your best.
Yeah, perfect. Great advice. The magic of explanations. Okay, Crudy says, I'm in Canada as an international student. I've taken 1 year course. Can I take a postgrad work permit after 1 year of study and then second course and take another 1 year of work permit?
Mm-mm. No, you cannot. And this is really, really important. So, a postgrad work permit, despite all the hype we've been hearing over the last few years of the pandemic, and I think probably, Mark, this
Yeah.
is one where people are going to be horribly confused because immigration should make it clear that postgrad work permits are a one and done. And if you read the fine print on the website and the policy, you will see that a postgrad work permit can only be issued once. However, during the pandemic, what they did was they had a postgrad work permit holder temporary 18-month extension. So technically, they were not extending the PGWP itself. They were having a new public policy to issue an open work permit to people who used to have a PGWP. But that's very confusing, and lots of people just think of it as a PGWP extension. And Mark and I always go back and forth about this because it's not an extension. And this is why I keep saying it's not an extension, because you can't actually get two postgrad work permits. So if you've done a course of studies, and what Mark was talking about in the beginning is sometimes people will do what's called program stacking. So they will do a 1-year course with the intention that as soon as they're done that 1-year course, right away they're going to enroll in another DLI for another course of studies that still meets all the program requirements, that's over 8 months in length, that is offered at a DLI in a PGWP eligible program, that together those two periods of study will aggregate into a 2-year program or be equivalent to a 2-year program, which makes them eligible for a 3-year postgrad. This is all super technical, and there's lots of ways that this can fall apart. So make sure that if you are going to do this, you can't apply for a postgrad work permit after the first degree. You have to properly stack those two programs of education. It has to be within a certain time frame. You can't let a long period of time expire because those two programs have to be completed within 2 years. So be really, really careful about that to make sure that you do not apply for your PGWP until after all of your education is done, and then you apply for the PGWP because it's only going to be issued to you once, except for these public policies, which are temporary in nature.
Yes. Okay, this is one that's complex that we deal with a lot. And I've had a number of people ask this question because there's much confusion. So Newton says, does an engineer in training registration with a regulatory body in Canada qualify as a certificate of qualification for express entry applications? And I think what's really important for people to understand is what is a certificate of qualification? And obviously, simple little Google searches will pull things up, but this is on the government's website itself. You can see here, what is it? Well, this is to determine if you qualify through the Federal Skilled Trade Program. That's the most important thing to understand. So these points are awarded to occupations that are governed by trade organizations. And depending on the body or authority issuing it, it can be called different things, but the key to remember is that it is a trade. And when people are searching, the best place to get more confirmation is actually in the the Federal Skilled Trade Program, the eligibility. And so when people are asking questions like we have here from Newton, I've had healthcare people ask, oh, I've got my healthcare certification. There's a lot of regulated occupations, but many are not trade level. And so the way that you can determine what they are is by looking at the actual major groups that are set out here. And you can see there are a few that do connect in. You can see 7, 8, and 9 are the major groups within the National Occupational Classification that fit under here. And then a couple other ones in the food service kind of cooks, butchers, and chefs also fit. But if it doesn't fit within these major groups, then no, you cannot count that as a certificate of, basically qualification for getting the extra 50 bonus points that are available in the context of express entry. Alicia, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah. And it's tricky because people figure, well, I'm a professional, right? I'm authorized to work as a professional, therefore I should be getting points. But these are different points. These are not points for professionals. These are points for regulated trade occupations. So look at those major groups, just like Mark was talking about. So think of the tier program, think about the first 2 digits of the tier, and those are the trades occupations. And they're specifically the ones listed.
Yes. All right, this one's from Jay Pow. Good afternoon. And this is a great question. Does the work experience I gained while waiting on my post-grad work permit approval count towards my 1 year work experience in Canada? Thank you.
hmm So Jay, make sure that you go and take a look at my article. So I did write an article about whether students can be working after the end of their authorized studies. And I wrote it way back when, because a whole bunch of people were looking at TR to PR programs. And then it really mattered whether you could accumulate your 1 year given certain programs. And so be very careful that there's an in-between period. So if you're doing your studies and then you get either a completion letter or notification of your final transcript, or your degree, then at the earliest of one of those three events, you must stop working entirely. So even if you were working as a student during your studies, you have to entirely stop working as soon as the school notifies you your school is complete. Then you can submit your PGWP application as soon as you have a complete application put together. And as long as you've provided your transcripts and your degree and completion letter from your school, and it's a complete application that you've properly submitted to IRCC, from the date of your PGWP application, assuming it's an accepted complete application, that's when you can start claiming. That's when you can work full time and start claiming Canadian education, or sorry, experience points after your education. So the day that you submit your PGWP application, as long as you've done it correctly, is when you can start counting your work experience as long as it's high skilled and full-time work or accumulating up till full-time work.
Excellent. All right, let's go to our next question. This one is from Mathur, I think. It says, my kids have study permits, visas. Okay, study permit, visa permit, valid until December. Do I have to apply for their extensions along with my post-grad application, or can their extensions be submitted along with my spousal open work permit anytime before December? So this is just more the timing when dependents may or may not be, aligned. So the dependent applications are issued to the expiry often of the study permit, and then now
Mm-hmm.
the person is looking to apply for a post-grad. What should they do?
Mm-hmm. So again, I would say book a consult because
Mhm.
these things have a few moving parts in terms of, and I'm just a bit confused about with my spousal open work permit. I'm assuming you mean your spouse's open work permit application rather than the PGWP. I'm assuming Matthews, I'm assuming you are the principal applicant with the PGWP, and then you also have a spouse on an open work permit. So sometimes the timing of those things are different. Normally what happens on the PGWP is as the principal applicant, they want to make sure that you are eligible and granted the PGWP, and then they will also grant the spousal open work permit as long as you are working in either a high skilled or a low skilled job, and you can actually prove that you are working in a high skilled or low skilled job based on pay slips and a letter from your employer. Then they will approve your spouse and the kids usually. Sometimes you would strategically want to include your kids and your spouse as part of that PGWP application, so you're not losing time, but you would have to be employed. So there's a few things happening here that I would want to ask you about.
Yeah. This super chat here is from Stanislav, and he says, I made a mistake in the address history in the provincial application, the PNP application, but I now want to correct it in the express entry PR application. Do I need to mention this in the letter of explanation? So this can be transferred to any previous application, you guys, whether it was a visitor application or your original study permit or your postgrad, or you made a mistake or didn't disclose work history. We see this all the time. Is it misrep or is it not? And what should we do to fix it?
Mhm. And here's the thing. Yes, yes, you should fix it. Yes, you should mention it. Yes, you should disclose it. Because if you just try to hide it or sweep it under the rug, immigration now has access to a whole bunch of machine learning tools, and they can really quite easily line up what you've put in your PNP application with what you put in your work permit application, with what you put in prior visitor visa applications or study permit applications, and they will instantly see where things don't match up. And so you always want to avoid misrepresentation. If you have made a mistake, you want to acknowledge that as soon as possible and do your best to take ownership and to correct it. And how to do that is something that I talk with my clients about all the time to make sure that you are properly disclosing this in both the PNP application and in the express entry application.
I've got a. This is a funny one. Talis says, "Thanks for answering. Hope we can go fish together in Alberta before the end of the year." Well, I am actually planning on Friday evening to go hike up to Little Beaver Dam Lake, which is kind of just near Waterton National Park, and there's some nice tiger trout in there. And I tried to catch some last week, but the ice was still over the lake, and so I couldn't get access to the fish. Although there was this little strip around the edge of the shore that had melted back a little ways, just enough for me to dangle a fly and see one of those tiger trout, swim out from underneath the ice. And as soon as he saw the fly, and he's like, that looks good, till he looked up and saw me, and then he said, "Oh, I'm out of here." So it's been so hot here. I know that the ice is all clear and gone now, and so any luck next week on Wednesday when I do my live, I'll have some pictures of some tiger trout that I caught with my fly rod. That's the hope. That's the hope. So
Yeah,
uh,
it's been so strange in Alberta. It went from, you know, barely above zero, snowing overnight, to literally it was like a flip of a switch, and all of a sudden it's 25 degrees. We don't have leaves on the trees yet, but all of a sudden it's 25 degrees and there's forest fires. So it's very bizarre this spring. It just seems
yeah,
like it went from winter directly to summer. So
yeah, just crazy. Okay, Yagnesh says, "I've claimed points for a sibling and uploaded the address proof, basically for the PR file. However, my sibling has just changed his address in Canada. So should I raise the web form to update IRCC?"
So
This is a
yes,
discretionary
Yagnesh.
one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on whether you've done a PNP application, right? Because if you were doing a provincial nomination application and that was the reason that you were potentially getting points for a sibling in your province, then you got to be careful and you've got to make sure that you're not going to lose your eligibility for your PNP nomination if your sibling moves to a different province. If it's just a change in address within the same city or the same province, it's probably not as big of a deal, but you probably will want to do a web form just to make sure that you're proving to immigration that this is the correct address in case they checked and that person is no longer at the address that you indicated in the original application. So it depends.
Exactly. And it's interesting when most people see this, they're like, "Oh, well, your sibling isn't really in your application, and if you didn't include, any specific details, like not everybody includes a lease agreement. Sometimes they'll include utility bills, and they'll be like, "Ah, it's not a big deal. No, don't worry about it. Don't need to update anything." Well, yeah, you can see an address change here, but this is why these questions really, like, I don't want people to get offended when Alicia and I say, "Look, you should really book a consult if it's a specific question that impacts your exact application versus a general question that's just designed to educate and provide information and maybe, a little bit of strategic kind of advice that way." But really, yeah, if the sibling is someone and they move out of the province, and there's a whole bunch of other factors that could come into play. So if we do say book a consult, there's a reason for it, you guys. Okay. Oh, this is sad. Spider-Man says, "Hey, Mark and Alicia. Saying hi from Hawkesbury, Ontario. Just had an ACL reconstruction surgery yesterday. Oh, I'm so sorry. My son had that happen." And he says, "I'm on sick leave now. I don't think I will include the time on sick leave in the CEC application." So you can confirm that, Alicia, what people usually should do in those circumstances.
hmm So yeah, that's tough, Spider-Man. If you're on sick leave, it depends on whether you're getting paid or if you're not getting paid during that time. So if you can make an argument that you're still employed during that time, and if it's a short period of time, then potentially you can say, I'm still employed. It's a week or a couple weeks that you're outside of work, but you're still getting paid. If you are out for longer, and especially if you are no longer paid, if you're going on medical disability, for example, then that would not normally be considered time that you are working for a Canadian company. So you would not be eligible to claim it for Canadian work experience. You'd have to exclude however long you're on leave or not getting paid from your employment, even if you're not technically fired or let go from your employer.
All right. This question is from Name. And Name says, I'm tuning in from Bangladesh. Now that the strike is over, how much time do you think it will take on average to process an ITA to Coper?
Mhm. Well, name all we can do is take a look at the updated processing times. So IRCC does provide a processing time for an inside Canada versus an outside Canada application. So if you look at IRCC processing times, and you go there and you can enter in the little kind of tool widget here. And so what kind of application? You're doing economic application. You're doing, I'm assuming, express entry. I don't know if it's FSW or CEC, but you can get your processing time. So for federal, they're saying it's 2 years basically, or sorry, a year, 26 months. So almost a little bit over a year for
Yes, and
that
it is
full application.
24. So 2 years. Yeah, that's what they're saying. 26 months. So over 2 years to
Mhm.
process, which, it's all over the map. And it's interesting here. You can see economic immigration. Okay. And then when I pull up here, yeah, the Canadian experience
CEC.
class, if we click on that one, you'll see in Canada, it's down as low as 4 months. So the reason that you guys that we see these processing times so high is because they're not distinguishing this by any one country. And
Yeah.
we know some countries have much higher processing times than others, and so that's what's really causing things to be weighted. But this is definitely on the high end. I think it's a case of under promising and hopefully over delivering for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point, Mark. 26 months, 2 years.
It's been a
Yes.
long day already, Alicia.
So yes, they are aggregating processing times for countries all over the world. So some countries we see faster processing times. It also depends on the complexity of your application. So if you're applying with a spouse and kids and you have multiple medical exams and multiple police certificates and background checks that have to happen, there's probably going to be longer processing times.
Yeah. So we'll pull up a sticky study permit issue here. And Okering, I'm assuming you're in Canada. He says, I know you well. If I don't clear tuition on time and IRCC is notified, how best can I handle such a situation to avoid deportation? Watching from Kampala, Uganda. So I'm not quite sure what clear tuition means on time. Like to me, I think he's asking if I'm here to study and then I don't pay my tuition, and maybe there's a situation of falling out of status, not being able to study. I don't know if there's a clear answer to this other than pay your tuition. But Alicia, do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on this?
So there are specific regulations under Section 208 for destitute students. So there is a way to try to ask for the ability to stay if there's been a collapse in your home country or if, for reasons out of your control, you're not able to meet the financial requirements for studies. However, all of those are very short-term solutions. Yeah, so under humanitarian reasons, if you become temporarily destitute through circumstances beyond your control, then you can put a submission into immigration and ask for a work permit, but it's only a very short term work permit. And there's a bunch of interpretive guidelines in terms of
Yeah.
how long that can be issued. Normally, it can only go to the end of the current semester that you're in. And then, of course, you're not meeting your study permit conditions because you're no longer a full-time student, so that can affect your eligibility for a PGWP. So a whole bunch of bad things happen if you can no longer pay tuition or abide by the conditions of your study permit.
Yes. All right. Leonora says, I have a question. I'm sitting at CRS 475 with IELTS expiring on June the 10th. I'm not sure if I should retake IELTS again. Well, I'll jump in. Leonora or Lenora, retake it. Do it. Don't hesitate. Yeah, we don't know what the scores are going to be. And who knows? Maybe the minister announces some creative program or uses his targeting draw special powers to do a targeted draw for individuals in a certain cohort that you may be fit into. And if you don't have the valid language test results, then you can miss out on that opportunity. So I strongly encourage you just to rewrite it and keep those valid. We've seen over the years with these big splashes or big programs, the people that really lose the opportunity are those that can't book a language test in time because everybody fills up all the spots and then you miss out. So you don't want to be in that situation. Okay, Jackson says, I forgot to mention a one-term study in my study permit application. Okay, so in the study permit application, I forgot to mention it. This is another one. And explained it in my PR application. I'm worried about the potential impact. What are your thoughts? So this is Miss Rep
Hmm.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jackson really, really book a consult. Like this is exactly the reason that somebody else had booked a consult because they said, "Oh, wait a minute, I took this one-term study during my regular course of studies, but it wasn't part of their regular program." And there are very specific rules under Regulation 188 sub 1 sub C about short-term courses of studies. And immigration and federal courts interpretation of that section is that you're only authorized to take short-term courses of studies if the program is under 6 months in duration, and if you take that short-term course of studies within the first 6 months of you coming to Canada in the first place. So probably if you did take a one-term study period that wasn't specifically authorized and part of your program, it could be unauthorized study, which you ought to have declared, and failing to do so would be misrep. So this is one where I would really want to talk with you specifically to understand exactly what happened, what
Hmm.
kind of studies, when they occurred. Was it a DLI? Was it not a DLI? Was it entirely distance learning? Let's talk about it.
Yeah. I just wanted to just pop that up. Okay, let's slide back and we'll just about starting to wrap up here. Promise says, what exchange rate does IRCC use in converting for proof of funds? Okay, well, Alicia, do you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, so normally I tell my clients just to use one of the posted um, Bank of Canada exchange rates. So find a reputable financial institution and then just make sure that you have listed what you have used as your currency converter.
Hmm. And sometimes you can go to the Bank of Canada that has their own currency converter, but the list of countries on here are quite limited. So not all of them are visible. But if your country is on here, one of these listed ones, then I will always use this. But if this doesn't work and the country isn't listed on the official Bank of Canada one, then sometimes what I'll do is I will just type in currency converter, and it's just kind of a guideline, right? So often I'll use, there's the Bank of Canada one, there's some other ones, there's this XE one. So it just depends on what your, because there's way more options that are associated with these than there is on the Bank of Canada one. So use whatever. Well, we've got lots of things popping up here. Use whatever you feel, is available, and it's kind of a ballpark. Yeah.
And just disclose which converter you
Hmm.
used. You can
Yeah.
actually provide them the URL.
Yeah, and I'll
Um,
even take a screenshot of it, and I'll include the conversion from the website itself as a part of the proof of funds section.
mhm. Mark, I did
Mhm.
see a question from Farah Nazreen, and I just wanted to touch on that one because it goes to eligibility in terms of whether somebody is eligible to create an express entry profile at all. And I see Farah had said, "Hi, Mark and Alicia, my IELTS score was 6.5 in reading, it was 5.5. Was 6.5. In reading, it was 5.5. Can I create express entry profile? How to get PNP to increase my CRS score? Please advise."
Mhm.
So be really careful here to make sure, and you can go to the website and you can look that the minimum eligibility criteria for FSW and CEC would be normally be CLB7. There are some provincial nominee programs where they have differences in the minimum language scores that are required. But if you're not
Right.
meeting those minimum eligibility for FSW or CEC, yeah, so take a look at the equivalency charts. So if you're looking at a IELTS of 5.5 in reading, then the 5.5 is going to equate to a CLB level 6. So this is the trick. You would have to find a PNP program that's going to actually make you eligible to apply with a lower than a CLB 7.
Mhm. Yep. And if we just slide back here, so when you're applying through the Canadian Experience class, depending upon the level of your work experience, which tier, tier 3, which was the old knock B, you can technically go through the CEC with as low as a CLB 5, which if we look back at our little score here, you can see a 5, CLB 5 has scores even this low, 4 or 5, 5, 5, 5 across the board. So each of the programs, the FSW has a minimum of a CLB 7, which is at this level. So you have to have at least a 6 if you're going through the federal skilled worker program. But depending upon the level of the skill level that you're at, a tier 3, which is the lowest, you can get through with a CLB 5, which is these scores on the IELTS. So just be aware of that as well. Okay, let's see. We've got a couple last ones to connect in. Okay, it's another express entry. Kobe says, and Kobe, this comes right back down to this. I'll I keep hitting the wrong buttons here. The express entry, you'll see my express entry course, the next masterclass is coming up May 22nd to the 25th. And now is actually the time to subscribe so you can get in, you can watch all of the lessons that are there's over 10 hours of lessons on every aspect of the express entry process, all the way through completing profile to the EAPR to the documents. Everything is in here. And then if you subscribe now, you've got time to actually watch the courses. And then when we do the 1 hour lives, May 22nd to the 25th, Monday through Thursday, you'll have the ability to get all of your questions answered. And anyone who subscribes to the course, there isn't a single person that will have a question go unanswered one way or another. And there's a community group associated with this, you guys, where you can post your questions if you can't attend the live at the time in which it's happening. And it's just for the people that connect in here and actually subscribe to the course that have access to this special kind of masterclass. And so I just want to point that out before we dive into answering the specific question. So says, please, how do I list work history when I've worked as an administrative officer for 5 years and now self-employed for another 5 years, and all within the last 10 years? So it's kind of a big picture, and there's problems with sometimes proving self-employed because, self-attested declarations are not accepted by IRCC for duties. But what are some basic tips you can share, Alicia? And we'll wrap up with this question today.
Sure. And so I guess assumptions can be deadly, right? So on that last question, Mark, you're absolutely right. When Farah was asking about the language assessment, I just assumed, oh, it must be an outside Canada FSW. But of course, you're right. It could be an inside Canada CEC as long as you've met the 1 year of Canadian work experience in addition to everything else. So this, Kobe, really depends upon whether you're doing a federal skilled worker application or whether you're doing a Canadian experience class application, because of course you cannot claim self-employed Canadian work experience. So it's only if you're looking at an outside Canada federal skilled worker application that you can claim years of self-employment. Of course, it does have to be within that 10-year window, and you've got to be able to document that you have done that work and that it is high-skilled work. So this is where it takes some time and effort and homework on your part to make sure that you are categorizing, listing the employment that you had as a paid employee with an employer with, hopefully some sort of proof, pay stubs, tax receipts, that you've been working in a paid job, and then a letter from that employer to document what your job duties were. But if you are looking at trying to show you your self-employment, then you've got a little bit more homework to do, because you have to usually provide contracts that you have with your clients. You need to have proof that you have a business, sometimes the incorporation documents or business leases, proof of your work product in some circumstances, depending on the types of work you've been doing. So this can get a little bit complex depending on the nature of your work and how long ago it was.
Yes. And I'll just point out once again, we have so many resources, you guys. So on the YouTube channel itself, obviously we've been at this express entry for a long time. There's a search feature. And if you type in self-employed, for example, it's really good. It will pull up previous videos that I've done on how do I claim self-employed work experience? How do I prove work experience if I'm self-employed? There's how do I claim work experience if I'm self-employed? So I've done a ton of videos in the past on this topic, and you can go back and you can watch those and get some additional tips. And as always, like I was sharing here, this is the actual course here. And this is a module specifically on records of employment that the video itself is 23 minutes explaining all the ins and outs of it. And we have a ton of templates built into the course available to help you not only get the documents you need, but to help you prove it to IRCC. So I encourage you to click on the link below, and there'll be a link where you can subscribe to the course. So yeah, and then as we've seen from other people who've taken the course, sometimes you just need a little extra assistance, a little extra help, and we encourage you to slide over. Keep pushing the wrong one here. Slide over to our firm website and look at About Us and then Our Approach, and just read how we work directly with our clients. Join the newsletter, absolutely. Our direct lawyer to client. So there's no one in between. You work directly with Alicia and I, and there's nothing in between. And we literally help you with all aspects of it, making sure that when you've got that application ready to go, that you know you've covered off everything you need to give yourself the best chance of success and getting it approved. So that is, yeah, just some things we want to point out. Oh, I guess one other thing I want to share too, and I haven't mentioned it in the live today, is the podcast. So make sure that you slide over here. Igor and I, we just recorded another QUET podcast today that we're going to be releasing, the good, the bad, and ugly of the QUET. But Alicia and I have our business immigration series that we're doing. So we've covered a bunch of topics on working in Canada as a foreign worker. It's directed to employers, foreign workers, and then we talk also about our impossible trivia. So go back and see if you can see if you can outsmart our resident expert, who is clearly Alicia, undefeated champion. She's been just crushing everybody on this. So see if you can match up with her. And you can find that on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for joining in today. It was another great edition of the Canadian Immigration Live Q&A. Thanks, Alicia, and take care, everyone.